Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for October 22nd. We're missing one of our colleagues tonight, so...
I nominate Mr. Peterson as acting chair.
Oh, and I guess I'll have to second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Just before we went on the air, Richard told me he was going to do that, and I was telling him that I was just going to go ahead and start talking, so, but... But here we are, we're official now. And we want to remind everybody that the meeting's being recorded. We also want you to know that the Board of Selectmen is going to meet an executive session, closed executive session, at the for the purpose of discussing the acquisition of the Kenny property off Phillips Street at the end of our meeting. And we'll start with a moment of recognition and appreciation for the servicemen and women who are serving around the world, but most especially in Afghanistan, where we're conducting a war. Thank you. We're going to start with the Permanent Building Committee members, John Nunnery and Fire Chief William Kingsbury. Update on the proposed safety building. John, Bill?
Well, the update. We have now hired an architect.
Excellent.
Door Whittier Architects. They have a consulting architect with them, CR is the name of the firm. And we're really just at the very beginning of the process at this point. We had a kickoff meeting about a week ago, I guess it was, Tuesday night.
How long ago did you hire the architect?
We hired the architect, let's see, it is October, so pretty much right at the end of September. We had the selection. I think we're still actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, I don't think we've actually signed the contract yet. We're still in that process, but they were selected. I think the selection came on to the Board of Selectmen as the recommendation.
Turn in a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen and they sign
Right.
the contract?
When you have it ready.
Right.
You have already?
No, when you have it ready.
So I think technically, I mean, that will flow. And I don't think there's any issues that have been brought up with the contract, but we did have a kickoff meeting to start the process of the work. And Door Whittier didn't have any issue with starting work without the contract signed, mainly because it was a fixed fee contract, or a fee not to exceed contract. So we did have a kickoff meeting, and one of the first things that we wanted to address was the issue of trying to determine whether we want to advise going CM at risk, construction management at risk. We haven't fully had that conversation, but as part of that conversation, we wanted to look at, we know that when we build the new police fire, it's a combination facility, and it's currently a combination facility. And in order to build the new facility, we'll have to tear down the old facility, which is going to means that we're going to have to phase the project. And because we're going to have to phase the project, and because CM at risk allows for the process of bringing in a construction manager early, helping you put a set of documents together, and helping you phase a project when they're complicated like this, we thought this might be a good avenue to look at. But in order to look at that first, we needed to really understand. We know that we can put the fire services down at the DPW, but the question that was out there was, what can we, if anything, do with the police station? The thought was always that the police would remain in place, fire services would move down, we would tear down the fire station, build that portion of the building, which would be essentially the police portion, move the police into the new building, tear down the old police station, and then build the new fire station. But one of the things that we all talked about is we would probably save quite a bit of money if we don't phase the project, or if we could just get the site all at once, tear both buildings down, build it all at new, we could save ourselves some time and money. The question that really came out of that was, where could the police station move? So the discussion that we had at the kickoff meeting really was about trying to identify some properties in town that might actually be viable. We're going to have our permanent building committee meeting is tomorrow, where we're going to talk a little bit about DPW and the police fire, but really we're going to have a subcommittee meeting on Thursday where the results of the conversation that occurred about what sort of properties are available, we're going to hear about that and make some determinations at that point to say, if any of these properties are actually viable, let's look at that. Let's talk about what CM at risk means in terms of pros and cons, and very quickly have to come to a decision, because the process of going at CM at risk will involve us as a committee making a recommendation to you as the selectmen, you as the selectmen approving it. Then we have to go to the Inspector General's office for their approval of the project. And that takes time. That'll take probably 2 or 3 months worth of time at least to go through that process. So we want to make the process, or we want to make that decision as soon as possible.
Mr. Chairman, John, how long of a timeline are we looking that they would have to be placed somewhere else?
Well, that's what we're going to have to work out. I think the thought is, I mean, typically with a building of the size that we're thinking, and we don't know the exact square footage, but we know that it's somewhere in the 30 to 40,000 square foot range. With a building that size, it's not unreasonable to think that you're in the 12 to 18 month construction time frame. So, you know, given that, we would think we would have to move them out for at least 12 to 18 months. But really, the exact time frame will get worked out once we make the decision, once we sit down with the architects, and if we go CM at risk. That's part of the benefit of bringing a CM on board, is they are in charge of the schedule, really putting together a true schedule that shows you design, construction, month by month, cost, month by month. So right now we're just taking sort of educated guess based on my experience in construction, Tim Bonfati's and others. But we think a building this size is about 12 to 18 months of construction. So,
And did you look at all, is there any possibility, or is it too crowded if both could get into the new highway garage? There's just not enough room? Could they both function there?
we did talk about that. I don't know, I can't say for certain that there is enough room in there. I think the sort of feeling that we all had was, we built this brand new garage. I don't think anybody felt really comfortable telling or trying to talk to Ken Feeney to say, okay, so we just built you a brand new garage, but you know what? You can't occupy it for another year or 2 years.
Concerns too.
Right. And there were, yes, exactly. You know, there were other concerns, safety concerns, neighborhood concerns, confidentiality concerns, where, for instance, which will be an issue regardless of if the chief moves out of the existing police station, just the issue of where do we put prisoners? Can he make an agreement with Walpole or Millis or anyone else? So these are questions we don't have answers to yet. These are questions we will have to get answers to. But right now we're just trying to figure out, are there even sites in the town that could even be viable? So the chief was part of that group. I think, Mark, you were part of that group. You were part of the group. I think, Kristen, you were part of the group. Christine. And I forget who else was part of that. I think that was about it. But the point is, they're going to be coming back along with the architects and the owner's project managers who are also part of that. They're going to report on Thursday as to what properties did they find, what are the pros and cons, and we can start making some decisions then based on, is there actually anything available? Some of the properties that I know were talked about were the senior center was one of the properties. Obviously the DPW. I don't know what the property is actually called, but the one over where the Papagenos,
The former bank?
The old Strata Bank.
Strata Bank.
so that was discussed. Again, I don't know what the viabilities of these are. This is just what was discussed at the meeting. So
We were trying to identify any spot that might be available, then trying to figure out if it's,
Live or not.
but there's a lot to move in the police station.
Yeah.
The communications, there's public safety communications, there's the 911, you need backup generator wherever you go, it's a
Radio tower.
radio tower.
Yeah.
So there's a
How
whole-
about the MEMA facility that's up at the state hospital, where there's already a lot of that stuff?
There's no
There's
no
no
sewer,
water,
there's no
no sewer,
water, there's no
Oh.
utilities. And as I understood it, that was one of the issues with the senior center. It seemed as though that might actually work, but part of the problem is there's literally no utilities there. Obviously, we could bring utilities in, but I don't think the idea of ripping up the roads just to bring in temporary utilities somewhere is really what we want to do. We want to look at something a little more,
I'm sorry, the senior center, you're saying, has no utilities?
not where we would want to put, we would have to bring in trailers.
Maybe a module, a couple modules.
Oh, okay.
Not-
And
not-
locate
yes.
them on a piece of property that you could use.
Sorry. Didn't mean to imply we were gonna
I think if
You
if
don't
take
want
over.
that.
Yeah,
the cost of that outweighs the savings, what's the point?
Right.
You know,
sorry,
I
I
don't know, but it's to be determined.
didn't mean to imply we were gonna take over this.
So the reason for doing that would be to make sure it's most cost effective, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it would clear the site.
Right. What we're looking at is the basic cost benefit analysis is if we move the police station off-site, it's gonna cost us something. But that cost in theory might be less than if we leave the police station up and operational while we're doing construction. So there will be costs, but the idea is that there would be less cost in moving them off site.
Is there a way to tweak the location of the building on the site so that you don't have to tear down the existing public safety building? I know that you wanted it facing on North Street, but,
I would say probably technically yes.
yeah, but you don't want to,
But
okay.
given what we're trying to do, given the desire to sort of have the apparatus exiting out onto North Street, it would, if we were to do that, we would be exiting apparatus onto either Dale Street or Adams Street. That would be the only options because we'd have to leave the existing building in place. And that poses a whole new set of problems of trying to get those
I
trucks
think
out.
at the end of the day, it's gotta come down anyway, so if you shifted everything to leave it up, and then all of a sudden,
Right.
then you take it down, and then it's like, it looks awkward, or,
Yeah. Right.
you know, or it doesn't function
Not
like it
allowed.
could have.
We did look at, when we did the feasibility study, I can't even remember exactly how many options there were, at least 5 options, and each option had an A, B, and C that I seem to remember. And we tried every combination possible, but what the feasibility study really proved was that where the building is now is really the best location for the building of the future to be. We looked at, we looked at repurposing the Dale Street School, trying to figure out if we could somehow turn that into a police fire. All the options that we looked at in reality could be done. It's just a lot of them would be much more costly than what we're proposing right now. And quite frankly, all the other options weren't necessarily getting the police and fire into the facility that they really need to be in. There were a lot more compromises that would have had to have been
Something
made.
else had to be done first, if you,
Exactly.
you'd have to do something with Dale Street School,
Right.
relocate them,
Right.
build a school before you could use that, but repurpose
Right.
the building. Same with,
Exactly.
You know, so, there's some other things that come into play.
Exactly.
John, could you maybe just give people a thumbnail sketch of what construction manager at risk means and involves?
Sure. So I think the easiest way to describe construction manager at risk is to compare it to the traditional process. So the traditional public construction process is dictated by Chapter 149, and it's just referred to as design, bid, build. So you design it, you bid it, you build it. And the way Chapter,
Somebody else.
I'm sorry?
Design with a designer.
Yes, design with an architect and the owner's project manager bid it, general contractors and file sub-bidders bid on it. You're using Chapter 149 construction laws, so you're bound by the file sub-bid system and you're bound by the low bid system. So the lowest eligible and responsible bidder is who wins unless there's a reason to not use the lowest. And that's actually what we did on the DPW facility. We didn't go with our lowest bidder because we found lots of problems in terms of that particular contractor had a lot of issues with the court system and debarment by DCAM. So we went over the low bidder to the second low bidder. But the traditional process is architect designs it, it gets bid, contractors bid on it, and based on the low bid, it gets constructed. What CM at risk essentially allows is early on in the process of design, hopefully usually during schematic design, at the latest maybe design development, you go out and you pre-qualify what's called construction managers. The easiest way to think of a construction manager is essentially a general contractor. They are in essence one and the same. But what they are offering to you as construction manager is pre-bid services. So they are offering the municipality or the awarding authority the benefit of their knowledge of construction. So they sit down with the design team, with the owner, with the owner's project manager, review the drawings. Generally, they're responsible for cost and producing cost estimates. They're looking at the drawings in terms of constructability, and they're helping the design team put a set of documents together so that when you get to the bidding phase, the contractor has been involved with a job so that in theory, as long as you're not making changes at the end of design, the contractor is giving you a guaranteed maximum price for this is what the building will cost. Now that guaranteed maximum price will have contingencies in it, but the theory is it's a guaranteed maximum price because they've been involved since early schematic design. They know the building, they know what the cost is, they know how to build it. They've been looking at it for 6 months, 7 months, however long the process goes, as opposed to the traditional design bid build method where the contractors have never seen the drawings until they go out to bid and they have 1 month to look at the drawings, put their numbers together and submit them. The CM has 6, 7 months to look at it and generate a guaranteed maximum price. In the CM at risk and Chapter 149 process, you're still pre-qualifying your file subtrades and you're still bound by low bid. So that process doesn't change. The pros and cons, so to speak, are that on the pro side of CM at risk, you're getting more involvement from the entire design team and construction team. So you're really creating, in essence, a true team. You've got a contractor, you've got an owner, and you've got a design team, all working together to get the project done. CM at risk also allows for early bid packages. So for instance, we could be, say, halfway through our design development documents and decide we want to do an early foundation package and an early steel package. So we could go out and bid foundations and footings and steel while the rest of the drawings are all still being completed. You can't do that with CM at risk. So the construction you can't do that with traditional design bid build. One of the benefits of CM at risk, they will say, or as is offered, is that you can do early bid packages, and in theory, you can get your building quicker, as opposed to the traditional design bid build method. Now, the con of all of this, as always is money. There's no hard evidence that I can point to that absolutely tells you that construction management using CM at risk will cost you more than design bid build. I can't point to something that makes that an absolute fact. What I can point to is the fact that I've been in construction for a long time, along with Tim Bonfatti and others, and it's our collective experience that construction management at risk jobs generally cost more than design bid build. But the benefits of using a CM at risk, having a contractor on board early, taking away some of the arguments that you inevitably get during construction over change orders of what was owned in the documents versus what wasn't owned, a lot of those things go away because the contractor was on board early and they have contingencies built into their guaranteed maximum price to cover some of those change orders. So it is a balancing act, no doubt about it.
Part of the problem is it's not also pure design, it's not pure CM at risk as you might have in the private sector where you employ a construction company and if they don't have all the people, they have long-term relationships with various specialty subs that they can use and employ. The traditional construction, you actually have listed specialties, roofing, plumbing, electrical, I don't know how many there are, 14.
16 file subbids.
And those actually get bid first. And then the GCs in bidding are free to take from each list, but as a practical matter, are most likely to take the low bidder in order to be competitive. So they end up at best working with somebody that maybe they've worked okay with in the past, and worse, they end up with somebody who's a sub that's a problem sub, and they know they're a problem sub, but they have made the concession for business reasons or what have you. when they passed the CM at risk statute, they carried some of that over. So they're not calling them file sub-bidders anymore, but they look and smell
Oh, they are.
a lot like file sub-bidders. They call them, what do they call them?
Oh, they're file sub-bids.
But, so they're still, so you still, as a GC, don't have the freedom to bring in the people that you want as a total team. You're still working with these other companies. And
Correct.
that's because the sub-bid industry, the specialty industry, is a very potent lobbying force in the state.
I can say that as Tim Bonfatti and I and a few others were actually the author of the CM at risk laws that are on books today, and Mark's absolutely correct. When we first looked at CM at risk, and this is getting a little off topic, but when we first looked at CM at risk, we didn't actually look at CM at risk. We were looking at design bid build, or just design build. And one of the groups that was at the table when we were negotiating this was the Associated Subcontractors in Massachusetts. They are the group that represent most of the file subbidders. It was condition one when we started discussions with them that we could not touch the file subbid system. And when we looked at design build, we ended up abandoning it mainly because we could not figure out a way to do design build in the state using the file subbid system. That's why we ended up with CM at risk, and we ended up with a process that, as Marcus said, as opposed to a CM in the private sector who would go out and find all of these trades that they need to complete your project, we are still bound in Massachusetts with CM at risk by using the file subbid system. So roofing, terrazzo tile, waterproofing, windows, all these file subbids, the 16 trades, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, you're still bound by those numbers. You're still bound by that low bid number. Now, on the positive side of that is that when you go CM at risk, again, you're bringing on the construction manager early, and they are there during our pre-qualification process. So when we go to pre-qualify all the subcontractors, we will have a CM sitting at the table with us as part of that team because it's mandated. The file sub-trades who are interested will know who the CM is, the CM will know who they are, and we will have the benefit of that CM at the table when we decide who we want to pre-qualify and not.
Yep.
Now, that is a good thing. Admittedly, on some of the trades, it will make no difference. Like the elevator trade makes no difference who your CM is, whether you do design, bid, build, or CM at risk. The elevator trade is as close to a monopoly as you get in this state. So we will get whatever we get because that's just the way that it unfortunately works in Massachusetts. But to be clear, there is a benefit of having a CM at risk or a CM at the table during that process. So,
And you probably have a relatively small enough project that
Yeah.
you will have more people qualified.
yes.
Whereas you take a major project like a school, for instance, and just the way that there's only a limited pool of GCs that can get bonding capacity, there's only a limited pool of specialty subs like electricians, for instance, that can handle a project that size as well, so.
We should have, given the bidding environment that we're in right now, I think by the time we actually get to bidding, if everything goes the way we sort of originally planned this in terms of schedule, I don't foresee us having real issues with actually getting enough file sub trades to want to pre-qualify. Back before I took my current job, when I was working at an architectural firm designing and building public schools, and pre-qualification was first put in place, we did have that problem on a lot of file sub trades, trying to find enough subs to actually get pre-qualified. And there's a funny little loophole in the law that said if you didn't get enough, you had to basically just keep going and forever, because the law, there was just a technicality not put in the law that allowed for it to stop, but the IG's office weighed in on that, allows you to stop. And since that time, we've gotten into a much better bidding environment. So I don't envision having a lot of problems trying to pre-qualify subs for any of the trades we're going to be using.
Good.
Steve, with the new architect on board now, does that set us back at all? I'm just trying to look at a timeline. We're looking at the April town meeting that actually would have some costs so that the voters would actually be able to vote on it in the April town meeting? That's still the goal, correct?
That's still the goal. What we put out for services, for the architectural services, what we're holding them to is, or what we put into the RFP is that we would like to be at 50% design development with full cost estimate for not only the remainder of the design services, but full construction costs. We worked through the interview process. We talked with the teams about the schedule because we did lose some time moving from one architect to another. But we didn't find a single one of the team that we didn't find a single firm that we interviewed that didn't feel they could meet our schedule. Matter of fact, some of the architects that came to us actually showed us a schedule that had a lot of time left over before we got to town meeting, which was nice for building up public input and support. I was a little concerned that that's great, but there is still quite a bit of work to be done. So I think the schedule that Dora Whittier has shown is a good schedule, one that I truly believe will get us to town meeting with an accurate number for, again, the remainder of design services plus construction services.
Is this everyone, the two chiefs and everyone that is on board as far as this new architect?
Yes.
We met with them last Tuesday.
Bill, could you just use the microphone,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
Actually,
Sure.
We met with them last Tuesday. Chief Meany had his meeting with them and his staff Tuesday. I met with them Wednesday with some of my people, and we reviewed all the spaces, and what they do is they come back with, you kind of make a wish list of what you think you're gonna need. They come back with drawings of all the spaces that we've talked about, and now what they'll do is they'll take these spaces and put them into what they call a bubble drawing, and lay them out into like a plan. We'll review those, and then we start to fine tune it from there. But I think it was, we had two very good meetings. Again, it was, police was Tuesday, fire was Wednesday, and then there was also a portion of the day where Bob and I met together with the architects for shared spaces. There's a couple of town spaces we were talking about, IT and storage and things of that nature, but it went very well, very, very, very well.
You're still talking that same setup where the fire station would be on kind of the town side, kind of a switch. But with the original plan that the first architect had, that could be very different or the same, or?
Well, we don't know. I mean, we told them that you had a clean palette, and come back with, but other than we feel that the apparatus bays will be still on North Street, and how they manage the rest of the building is.
Was it his design or just the personalities that, with the first architect?
First one, we just didn't have that gut feeling that it was gonna work. We went to a couple of their projects, they were okay, and they really didn't have a lot to show us. And very nice, firm, and they said, we'll build you whatever you want, but that's not the case. We needed a lot of we want a lot of guidance from people that have done it, and what's being done today in the public service building. Because we're looking at a 50-year investment here at least, so we don't want to,
Right. Right.
shortchange ourselves or shortchange the community that's investing in it.
I actually want to compliment you and the police chief for actually changing the architects, because I think that was not probably an easy thing to do.
It wasn't.
And I think it does inure to the benefit of the town and the project in the long run. So thank you for doing that.
It's going well.
Anything else? No. I had maybe just one more question, John. It's just because you mentioned that you had rewritten the law in Massachusetts. I've always been bothered by the fact that
Let's be clear, I only wrote the CM at risk law.
I know, but I figure that you know about the other ones too. And I've always been bothered by the fact that because of the Boston Undercommon Garage costing more and funneling the money into the pockets of the people who were involved, we've ended up with this system in Massachusetts where it costs, what I've heard is like 25 to 30% more to build a public building than a private building, same building.
Yeah.
And so is there a solution to that, or are we just stuck with this?
That's a
I'll get you
broad
off the hook.
policy
As I said
discussion.
earlier, there's
Could
a
you use
lot
the
of-
microphone so that the people at home can hear
As
too?
I stated earlier, in the context of file submitters, there's a lot of special interest groups.
Yeah, okay.
There's still a reform group meeting, as I understand it, looking to fine tune what's on the books, but that's probably the most you can expect is to fine tune. There's just, it works for a lot of interests that are there.
And the residents of the state end up paying 25% to 30% more for their public
Well,
buildings.
the biggest chunk is the prevailing wage law.
Yes.
And that's a creature unto itself, so.
So I have to, these are my personal opinions as opposed to my professional opinions, but I agree with Mark. I'm part of the construction law working group that he's referring to, which is a group of the design and construction industry that was put together by, it's being chaired by Secretary Goldstein and Secretary Shore, so the Secretary of Labor and Development, Workforce and Development, and Secretary of A&F. It's being led by DCAM. The conversation's being led by DCAM. And the purpose of the group really was to look at issues related to transparency, fraud, the pre-qualifications, all of the issues that sort of came out of the 2004 construction reform laws that were put in place. When that was done, this group that's meeting now met back then, and we came up with a 27-page technical corrections bill to solve a lot of the issues that came out of the 2004 law. As you can imagine, a 27-page technical correction bill dealing with construction law doesn't get a lot of attention in the legislature. It's pretty mind-numbing stuff to read. So trying to get the legislature to look at that, to understand it, to want to pass it is very tough. So we sort of gave up on that, and now this construction law reform or construction law working group is in place. Tim Bonfati's on it, myself, and others. We are looking at these issues. Will any of the things that we come up with reduce cost by 20%? Absolutely not. The reality is we live in a very blue state. Unions are very prevalent. I was at Joint Committee of State Administration hearings today, and one of the big topics there was PLAs. And you had folks like
What's a
Frank,
PLA?
project labor agreements,
Oh.
which some are not mandated by law, but groups like UMass Building Authority or the UMass system use project labor agreements. In essence, all a project labor agreement is it's an agreement with the unions that they will not strike during the course of your job. So the way unions work, if one strikes, they all strike. So if one strike occurs somewhere in Boston, all union workers everywhere stop working. The PLA guarantees that the workers on your job will not stop working. Today there was lots of discussion about bills that have been filed to either mandate PLAs on all jobs, and as you can imagine, the Republican minority leader has a bunch of bills to ban PLAs. It would be my opinion that PLAs absolutely do add construction cost to jobs because you are dealing with union overhead that you have to pay. The file subbid system very much drives up costs of construction in Massachusetts, but the reality is you're not going to get rid of the file subbid system in Massachusetts. So we do the best with what we can, and we tinker around the edges as much as we can because wholesale change is very hard. So probably not the answer that you'd like to hear, but
It's just, I mean, it's interesting, basically as a public official, it's kind of interesting that we've opted to have this system that's causing our buildings to
Right.
be more
You're
expensive.
absolutely right. All the problem projects.
And it's a political decision, I guess, is what you're saying.
And the underground
Sure,
garage
it's
was
not.
only the worst and the most obvious. There was the UMass library. There was a whole list of them. None of them were local projects. And then we had our episode, our very own episode here with this building, which was my baptism by fire. And somebody whose history was as a site contractor, who by the subsequent investigation had actually phonied up DTM filings to make it appear that they were qualified to do a project like this when in fact they weren't. They came on the project. Some of the most egregious stuff occurred, not just incompetence, but absolute willful things, such as, this building is historic, Richard, as you well know. It's brick. There had been 2 fires. They weren't quite sure what the conditions were gonna be. However, one thing was clear, the brick is structural, and the walls on the outside have to appear perpendicular, but you need more weight bearing at the bottom. So in fact, what happens is it tapers on the inside. They were told to take measurements. They did quick measurements on the ground floor, and as you know, this project called for a 3rd floor to be inserted where the schools are now. They went ahead and they ordered their trusses based on their ground floor measurements, and when the trusses showed up, they were too short to fit in fully into the risers. So what they did was they cut slices, put them into the risers, then they put the main truss in, was only overlapping, in some cases, an inch or so. And then they nailed plywood on either side, so it would appear, if you looked at the end, that it was going all the way through. And if it weren't for the fact we had a diligent clerk of the works at the time who saw what they were doing and reported it, we probably would have had a 3rd floor that would have collapsed once weight was brought to bear. And ultimately what happened is they defaulted on the project, the bonding company came in and took over. There was a full-scale investigation because not only Medfield, but the Millis Town Hall, and there was a library somewhere down on the South Shore, that there were 3 projects they simultaneously defaulted on. And the IG came in and did a report and an investigation. They were aghast at what they saw, and ultimately a bunch of recommendations ensued, which were not enacted, and this GC their penalty was they were debarred for 3 years. In other words, for 3 years they couldn't bid on a state project, which is virtually a slap on the wrist.
So they come 3 years later, they're right back again.
I've always been fond of saying that the state is yet to learn that low bid does not equate to best construction or best quality. It just simply equates to low bid. And it's been my experience that low bid is low bid for a reason. They want the job, they get it, they look at your drawings, they want to drive a truck through any hole they can find in your drawing because they know that on the change order process, they're going to get a 20% markup right off the bat. And I've dealt with my share of bad file sub-bids. What I've generally found is that when you look at the general bids who have to take all the file sub-bids and put their package together and then fill in everything that's not part of a file sub-bid to come up with their general bid number, what I've always found is the guy that's in the middle is usually the guy that you want. They're the ones that have actually looked at the drawings, they look at the site, they understand what it's going to take, and they've actually accounted for it. But unfortunately, our state law doesn't really allow us to easily just take the middle number. You have to really jump through some hoops to get to that number. Whether the state will ever figure that out, I don't know. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but.
Thanks for working on it.
Yes, you're welcome.
Anything else, Richard? Thank you very much.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Appreciate you
Thank
guys coming in.
Thanks, Bill.
Next, we're going to hear from Ross Smythe and her subcommittee of members working on the State Hospital Advisory Committee. Their subcommittee is working on the public visioning regarding the state hospital.
Good evening.
Good
Hi, Ross.
evening.
Did you all get a copy of the bid from Howard Stein Hudson?
Yeah, looked impressive, I thought.
Well, the State Hospital Advisory Committee meeting met. I contacted all 4 of the references that were provided to us by Howard Stein Hudson. 3 of them responded, the 4th didn't. They all responded the same day. All had very positive things to say about the company, and specifically about Ted Brovitz, who would be the project manager for the town on this public visioning session. So the State Hospital Advisory Committee voted to unanimously recommend that we accept this proposal, and we are bringing it to you all and to see if you have questions. Sarah Raposa has worked with Ted Brovitz before when she worked for the town of Westport. And I think, did she work for Easton, the town of Easton? I don't, he mentioned the town of Easton where he had worked for, but she's worked with them before. She has a very positive relationship with them. And if you have any questions,
Richard?
No, I thought it was very impressive on the fact that you're unanimously in favor of that. I'm fine with that.
I thought it looked good to me. I don't have any special questions about it. Look forward
Okay.
to it.
so next would be a contract. And does that fall into, I'm just trying to figure out how to enact the next step now.
I think Mike and Mark will work that out, or Mike will ask Mark to do it.
Okay, and I will email Ted Brovitz tonight, because we're actually trying to schedule the first session of the advisory committee with him as soon as possible, so now I can start moving forward on that.
Mike, do we need to vote to award
I
the
think you
contract?
should vote
Okay.
to award, and I believe the amount was $7,000.
Yes.
So in accordance with the proposed submission.
Want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we award the contract to Howard Stein Hudson Associates, Inc. Consultants.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for what
Thank
you're
you very
doing.
much.
Thank you.
I really think this phase now becomes very important to see what the community wants. We've gone through a long process where the community has a little bit been on the sidelines, and rightly so because of what we've gone through. But I just think this is very, very important to get the community keyed in.
I'm 100% in agreement with you. And one of the little ancillary things is another member of our visioning committee, Alex Stevens, emailed Ted before they've been awarded the contract, because we've come up with our questionnaire and we think it's all done. And Alex said, why don't we ask them if they'll help us? And Ted has offered to show our questionnaire to his in-house questionnaire man, even before he was awarded the contract. So he seems like a really nice guy. So, but we are trying to get the public involved,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
think you're right.
Good. Thank you.
So I guess are we done then with our business? Except for the,
yeah,
I'm sorry, can you hold on just a second, Mike? We
Sure.
seem to have a question here. Did you say you're going to take the town administrator, John?
No, certainly not. That would be a shadow of the administrator. I thought I'd
Talking about my stomach?
thought I'd, as a result of talking with Representative Garlick yesterday, focus our attention a bit on what the status is on the, not on what Roz was talking about, but about the water tower and the well field. She informed me that both House and Senate Council had approved it. So I would urge that the town get a copy of what they approved. I mean, it probably is what we totally expect.
But you never know.
But we never know.
And
right?
hopefully they approve the same version.
Precisely, that's what, yeah, right.
Should we be officially asking them to move it forward at this point, too?
It has been filed. right?
Oh, it has been
Yeah,
filed?
we asked them, last week, we sent them letters asking them to.
Okay,
file
we
it.
did, good.
And it has, and she assured me it had been filed. Now, what gave both of us pause is that the formal end date for this active session, I understand that this whole session extends into next July, but come November 20th, they've had their last formal meetings, I suppose, until the holidays are over. At least that's what Denise told me the other day. So November 20th is an important date for us to target, in that we want everything completed before then.
Do they see any reason why that cannot or should not be met?
Well, I talked with Liz Boder in Senator Timothy's office, and she went through all of the steps it has to go through. Now, she said many of those are walked through, that she brings them down and goes from this to that. But that there are hearings on it, there are committee meetings, and so forth. So I guess what I'm really urging is that the town try to speed this by taking some affirmative actions, like having a call every week to get a status report. How do we stand? What's happened? What progress have we made? I believe they're getting tired of hearing from John Harney, because I do call both of their offices quite, not daily, but almost daily. And it gets wearisome, I'm sure, on them. So that is really the,
Let me just follow up on that a little, Jen. So if Town Hall called, who were they calling? Both
I would-
Senator Timothy and Representative
one
Gauss?
person at Representative Garlick's office, Amanda. So you should call her.
Yeah, she's very good, yeah.
Right.
And she's in touch with the staff, Senator Timothy's staff, so.
She's very much in touch with Liz Boulder, who is the legislative assistant to.
So Amanda is the one in Senator and Representative Gauss' office?
Yes, and Liz at Senator Timothy's office.
And is that something we can follow up to? Anything else that would assist that, or is that enough, John?
Well, I think, we just have to play it as it starts to fall. But what we can't do is have weeks go by and then come up to the 18th and say, how do we stand? Well, we'll never get to it. Everybody has assured me that this can be done, but that has to be, every day has to be used. Okay. And any other points I had here? In fact, it might be good to get the same checkoff that Liz gave me as to what the precise steps are that they have to go through. Denise Garlick told me that Senator Timothy is on a key committee, so that he should be able to move this along pretty well, and that she had talked to the chairman in the House and saw no problem, that this was a local matter and should move okay, but it does have to receive care and attention.
Who has this checkoff list? Amanda again?
Pardon?
Who has this checkoff list that you?
Or Liz Border would have it. I mean, she's the one who took me through
They
it.
all have it whenever they file
So,
legislation.
so we can get a copy of that and follow?
In fact, I think Representative Garlick had that when she had her
Yeah,
public presentation
Yes.
here recently,
yeah,
so.
she usually includes it in anything she sends us.
So we have that, or we can get that so we know? Okay.
So this was obviously was the mediation committee's good work that brought this to this point. But now it's really, since you are the people who are moving it forward, it's really up to the Board of Selectmen and the administration at this point.
Thank you for calling on our behalf to keep it moving along so far.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Massaro, could you use the microphone, please?
this is really a question perhaps for Mr. Harney. Will we find out if a public campaign is needed? The last time Senator Timothy tried to get some additional funding to get the cleanup done at the river this time last year, we pretty much bombarded the offices of all of the legislators with requests to get that legislation approved. And I'm assuming that we don't want to do that now unless it's absolutely necessary. Will there be some point that if somebody thinks it might be necessary, they'll let us know?
No, at this point, Bill, I just have no better idea than you do, but I mean, it's the legislative, such a large and sometimes slow-moving body that I really think, I understand that this is a roll call vote. That's the need. That's why the November 20th is the important date, because if there's a roll call involved, then people have to be there to answer the roll call, right? And so the informal sessions that they may run afterwards wouldn't be sufficient to handle this. I'm sure they'll have informal sessions between the 20th.
So if we miss November 20, we'd be into January then.
It's going to go over, and as we've been through all the reasons we don't want to extend this in the past. And it does have relationships and implications for the negotiations which are ongoing with DCAM on the total hospital issue.
And Bill, I think we probably have to take our clue from our legislative delegation.
Yeah.
If they say we need to do something, then we need to do it. If they say back off and let us handle it, then I'd say we back off and let them handle
That's
it.
where I was going, but I guess what I was looking for was hey guys, you'll let us know if you need something from us, kind of, remark back to our legislators, just to make sure. Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
Congressman Kennedy is going to be here on Saturday at the library, and it wouldn't hurt to go over and remind him that Representative Lynch came by and helped us out when we needed it. And if we need help, I don't think it would be extraordinary to ask him to make a call.
Yeah, yeah. He's going to be there from 2 to 3 if people want to stop in and see their congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Sorrell.
I know you noted that we have an executive session for land acquisition on the Kenny property. I didn't know, while we were still in open session, whether you wanted me to outline where we go from here,
Yes, definitely.
process sense.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah.
Sure.
There's only one
Yeah.
or two things we need to discuss in executive because town council has to negotiate a P&S agreement, and there's a couple of things he needs to consult with you on, but the rest of it, I think we ought to discuss in open session, so.
Mark, please, go ahead.
When you're dealing with what's called chapter land, which is land in agriculture, forestry, or recreation, this happens to be forestry land, there's a statutory process in the event of a conversion out of forestry, which started with the notice. And then there was 120 days for the town to exercise its statutory, what's called first refusal option. And technically, we have not yet exercised that because it has to be done by statute by the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen, at least under Medfield's charter, don't have that kind of authority, and you need to have the, ultimately, legislative authority to fund the project anyway. So we went to town meeting, we got the approval, we went to ballot, we got the voter approval, so the financial backup is there. So that being said, the next step under the statute is for the Board of Selectmen to hold a public hearing at a posted meeting to determine whether or not they're going to exercise the first refusal option. And discussing that with Mike and Evelyn, we are looking at your first meeting in November for that purpose. So that night, I will have to submit to you for your consideration a proposed order which will have the effect of the town's exercise of its first refusal option. Then the other two items that we have to do per the statute to give a copy of that to the landowners and record a copy at Norfolk Registry of Deeds. And then we have a specified period of time to negotiate a purchase and sales agreement with the landowner, which basically has to contain substantially the same terms and conditions as the original agreement with the third party. And obviously,
Is that kind of cut and dry, because that's already set, right?
There's some
yeah,
terms
there's
that
a
are
few,
not-
there's a few components. We're within a range on the price, and it'll be a somewhat simpler document by reason of the fact that obviously all the development contingencies that were in the original agreement, other than the fact they have a relevance to the price and some other things. It should be a fairly simple, straightforward document, is the bottom line. So we will then finalize the purchase and sales agreement, and then following that, we would have what's called a closing, as you would in any real estate transaction. There's a short due diligence period. We probably want to have the title run down, and then we would close, and the landowners would give a deed to the town, and the town would take title for the purposes stated in the town meeting vote,
You talking a couple of months?
max.
Well, it depends too on the wishes of the owners, you know, as Mark pointed out, there may be tax considerations that they would want to
Yeah, I
delay
mean,
the
it could
purchase,
be,
it's up to them.
they may want to close in January as opposed to December. That's
Okay.
not uncommon with land transactions. Any questions?
No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else that anybody wants us to talk about in open session before we throw you all out? The Medfield Board of Selectmen needs to meet in executive closed session for the following purpose: to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate, of real property, land of Kenny consisting of approximately 22 acres off Phillips Street, I declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. I always thought it was 31 acres, Mike.
It is.
It is, yeah.
Why does this say 22 then?
22 is what, that was what the conservation
Well, total
restriction
patch-
was.
total patch
Yes.
is total 31.
It was 22 acres that are under forestry, and then the
10.
remainder was out of forestry.
The open session will not reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session. Motion, I move that the Board of Selectmen go into executive session for the following purpose: to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, land of Kenny consisting of approximately 22 acres off Phillip Street, if an open, do we want to say 22 or 31 then, in the motion?
We have authority from the town meeting to deal with up to 31.
Consisting of approximately 31 acres off Phillip Street, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of a public body and the chair so declares, and that the open session not reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session.
And I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Oh, roll call. Mr.
Oh.
Desorga.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson, yep.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.